Donald Trump just made a bold move against Canada, again. New tariffs are imposed, and this time Canada isn't staying silent. With billions of dollars in trade at stake, this could spiral into an all-out economic battle. We've seen this playbook before. Trump slaps tariffs, hoping to bring America First manufacturing back. But every time there's retaliation. The question is, can he really handle what's coming next? This isn't just about politics. This could impact everything, from the price of your groceries to the future of North American trade. So how did we get here? And more importantly, who will blink first? This is the Atlas shift, and we'll break down why Trump is targeting Canada, how Canada is hitting back, and who stands to lose the most in this high-stakes economic showdown. The US and Canada are two of the biggest trading partners in the world, exchanging over $750 billion in goods and services every year. Trump claims the US gets a raw deal in global trade, and Canada is no exception. While the trade war with China dominates headlines, Canada has frequently found itself in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. The US president argues that Canada's high tariffs, subsidies, and restricted market access give it an unfair edge, ultimately harming American businesses and workers. One of Trump's loudest complaints centers around Canada's high tariffs on American dairy products. Under Canada's supply management system, a steep 270% tariff is imposed on US dairy imports. This makes it nearly impossible for American farmers to compete in the Canadian market, whether it's selling milk, cheese, or other dairy goods. Trump has repeatedly called this situation unacceptable and a disgrace, claiming it's a prime example of Canada's unfair trading practices. But dairy isn't the only battleground. Trump has also accused Canada of using government subsidies to prop up its lumber and aerospace industries. The ongoing dispute over softwood lumber, for instance, has been a long-standing point of contention. The US argues that Canada's subsidies for its timber industry allow Canadian producers to sell wood at artificially low prices in the US market, undercutting American producers. This has resulted in billions of dollars in tariffs and counter-tariffs over the years, intensifying the friction between the two countries. Additionally, Trump has raised concerns about Canada's restrictions on certain US tech firms and its stronger labor protections, which he argues create barriers for American businesses trying to expand there. Meanwhile, Canadian companies face fewer obstacles when entering the US market. To Trump, these imbalances, whether in tariffs, subsidies, or trade restrictions, mean that American businesses are fighting an uphill battle. For him, tariffs are the solution, a way to level the playing field. For Trump, tariffs are not just about punishing Canada. They're about protecting key American industries, especially manufacturing, from foreign competition. Canada is the largest supplier of aluminum and steel to the US, making up over 60% of US aluminum imports and a significant portion of its steel. Trump argues that relying on Canadian metals puts US national security at risk. It's not just about trade, it's about strengthening American factories that compete with cheaper foreign materials. By imposing tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, Trump says he's defending US metal producers, preserving jobs in key manufacturing states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. These states rely heavily on steel and aluminum for their industries, and Trump insists that such tariffs help protect thousands of American jobs. When he imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and 10% on aluminum in 2018, US steel companies initially saw a short-term boost. Major players like US Steel reopened plants, rehiring more than 1,500 workers. However, the benefit was short-lived as retaliatory tariffs from Canada soon began to take a toll, particularly on US farmers and manufacturers who depended on cheaper Canadian materials. But metals aren't the only focus of Trump's tariffs. The auto industry is another major target. The North American auto sector is deeply intertwined, with parts often crossing borders several times before they're assembled into a finished vehicle. Despite this, Trump has pushed for tariffs on Canadian auto parts, arguing that they'll force more production to move to US soil, creating jobs in American factories. The administration believes that this will help revitalize the US auto industry, making it more competitive and more self-reliant. But tariffs aren't just a weapon in a trade war. They're a tool for Trump to achieve something bigger, better trade deals. He sees tariffs as leverage to force other countries, Canada included, to renegotiate trade agreements that he believes are tilted against the US. This approach worked in 2018, when Trump used steel and aluminum tariffs as a pressure point to secure a new deal with Canada and Mexico, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. The USMCA, which replaced NAFTA, forced Canada to make concessions, including opening up its dairy market and agreeing to provisions that favor American auto workers. For Trump, tariffs are more than just punitive measures. They're a strategic move to reshape the global trade landscape in favor of US interests. The question remains, however, will this strategy work? To understand the full impact of these tariffs, we first need to break down the trade balance between the US and Canada. Which industries depend on this relationship the most? What products are exchanged the most? And, most importantly, who benefits more? Let's take a deep dive into the numbers. The United States and Canada share one of the largest and most interconnected trading relationships in the world. In 2023, the total trade between the two countries amounted to a staggering $774 billion, with Canada ranking as the United States' largest trading partner after China and Mexico. The numbers are eye-popping, but to understand the true dynamics of this trade relationship, we need to look beyond just the figures and explore the industries that are most affected by these cross-border transactions. In 2023, U.S. exports to Canada totaled $353 billion, while U.S. imports from Canada stood at $421 billion, resulting in a trade deficit of $67 billion for the U.S. On the surface, this might seem like a win for Canada. After all, it exports more to the U.S. than it imports. However, trade is about more than just these raw numbers. It's about the types of industries involved and how the countries interact within those sectors. Trump's main concern in this trade relationship is that Canada benefits disproportionately by exporting valuable resources and manufactured goods to the U.S., while simultaneously limiting market access for American industries. The United States' largest imports from Canada include energy products, vehicles and auto parts, metals and minerals, forestry products, and agricultural products. The biggest import category is energy, with the U.S. heavily reliant on Canada for more than 50% of its crude oil imports. This gives Canada significant leverage over U.S. energy security. Any disruption in this trade could have serious consequences for U.S. fuel prices and the broader economy. Another major category of U.S. imports from Canada is the auto sector. Canada is the second largest exporter of auto parts to the U.S., and the automotive industry is deeply integrated across the border. Parts often cross into Canada before being assembled in the U.S., creating a highly interconnected system. Trump's tariffs on Canadian auto parts could disrupt this intricate supply chain, potentially raising production costs for American automakers. On the flip side, Canada is a key market for U.S. exports, with the U.S. exporting machinery and equipment, vehicles and auto parts, electronics and technology, agricultural products, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals. In fact, Canada is the #1 destination for U.S. exports, and the U.S. economy is highly dependent on this trade. More than 9 million American jobs are tied to exports to Canada, making this economic relationship one of the most critical for the United States. Even though the U.S. runs a trade deficit with Canada, much of the export landscape involves industries where the U.S. holds a surplus, particularly in services, technology, and agriculture. In services, for example, the U.S. exports a variety of business services, financial services, and intellectual property to Canada. The technology sector is another major area where the U.S. maintains a competitive advantage, particularly in fields like software, telecommunications, and electronics. In agriculture, Canada imports a significant amount of American goods, including grains, meats, and dairy. For the U.S., these agricultural exports are critical to farmers and the broader rural economy. The agricultural sector has long benefited from trade with Canada, and tariffs or trade disruptions could have ripple effects across the U.S. farming community. While Trump points to the trade deficit with Canada as a sign of an unfair relationship, it's important to recognize that trade deficits don't tell the full story. The U.S. and Canada have a highly interdependent trade relationship, with both countries relying on each other for critical resources and markets. Canada has a surplus in energy, metals, and auto manufacturing, while the U.S. has a surplus in services, technology, and agriculture. Disrupting this balance would hurt both economies, as trade wars rarely have a one-sided impact. Canada depends on the U.S. for key markets, and any tariffs or retaliations would affect both nations' businesses and consumers. In the face of Trump's tariff threats, Canada has firmly vowed to retaliate with stronger countermeasures. With billions of dollars and millions of jobs on the line, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has taken a bold stance, rolling out a new wave of tariffs aimed not just at the U.S. economy, but at strategically important industries that could impact Trump's political base in key swing states. Trudeau has targeted a whopping $107 billion worth of American goods, with 25% tariffs on $21 billion of U.S. imports set to go into effect on February 5th, coinciding with the start of Trump's tariffs. The remaining $86 billion will be subjected to duties over the next 21 days, sending a clear message to Trump that Canada is prepared to stand firm. Trudeau's statement has been unambiguous. Tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk. The Canadian Prime Minister has warned that these retaliatory measures could lead to the shutdown of American auto assembly plants and manufacturing facilities, which would, in turn, drive up costs across multiple sectors. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery store and gas at the pump, he emphasized, underscoring the broad consequences these tariffs will have on U.S. consumers. Canada's exports to the U.S. account for 17.8% of Canada's GDP and support over 2.4 million Canadian jobs. As such, the stakes are extraordinarily high. But instead of backing down, Trudeau is rallying Canadians to push back by encouraging them to buy Canadian-made goods and vacation domestically, rather than spending money in the U.S., strengthening national resolve in the face of economic pressure. A critical area of retaliation is the U.S. auto industry. In 2023, Canada supplied more than $30 billion worth of auto parts to the U.S. Canada is prepared to target American-made vehicles and machinery, which would hit crucial manufacturing states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, states where Trump's political support is most vital. Agriculture is another sector Canada is targeting with its countermeasures. The U.S. exports approximately $7 billion worth of agricultural goods to Canada annually. Under the new tariff strategy, Canada is focusing on American exports such as beer, wine, bourbon, and even orange juice from Florida, Trump's home state. By imposing tariffs on these products, Canada would not only affect U.S. farmers but also cause a surplus of unsold goods in the U.S., leading to lower prices and potential profit losses. During Trump's previous trade war with China, American farmers lost around $28 billion in revenue, forcing the U.S. government to issue bailout packages. A similar outcome could occur with Canada, placing an additional strain on the U.S. economy and potentially forcing taxpayers to foot the bill. Ontario's Premier, Doug Ford, has thrown his full support behind Trudeau's strong response to U.S. tariffs, arguing that Canada must hit back hard and dollar for dollar. Ford has been outspoken, stressing that Canada has no choice but to retaliate. He has also highlighted Canada's significant leverage over the U.S. through its vast resources, including high-grade nickel, critical minerals, energy, uranium, potash, and aluminum. These resources put Canada in a powerful position to exert economic pressure on the U.S. Ford has suggested that Canada could even cut off its energy supplies to the U.S., citing Ontario's role as a major supplier of electricity. In 2023, Ontario powered 1.5 million homes in the U.S., with energy exports to Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. Such a move could deeply disrupt the U.S. economy, particularly in states that rely heavily on Canadian energy. Furthermore, Canada holds a substantial amount of U.S. debt, approximately $240 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. Should tensions escalate further, Canada could begin selling off these bonds, weakening the U.S. dollar and raising borrowing costs for the American government. This economic move could have long-lasting consequences on U.S. fiscal policy and add another layer of pressure on the U.S. economy. Beyond immediate tariffs, Canada's strategy is also focused on long-term economic resilience. The Canadian government is working to diversify trade partnerships to reduce its dependency on the U.S. as a trading partner. Canada is already part of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, and has a trade deal with the European Union, CETA. By expanding its global trade network, Canada can reduce its reliance on the U.S. and mitigate the impact of future tariff escalations. Canada is also investing in strengthening its domestic industries. The government has already allocated billions in subsidies to boost sectors such as electric vehicle, EV battery production, steel manufacturing, and technology industries, fields that were previously dependent on U.S. trade. These efforts aim to make Canada's economy more self-reliant, ensuring that it is better equipped to weather future trade storms and reduce its dependence on the U.S. market. Finally, Canada is preparing to use legal channels to challenge Trump's tariffs. Under the terms of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, Canada has access to dispute resolution mechanisms, and it has already won several cases against the U.S. in recent years, including the softwood lumber dispute. If Trump refuses to back down, Canada could escalate the issue to the World Trade Organization, WTO, where it has a successful track record in challenging U.S. trade policies. While this legal process can be lengthy, it would bring international attention to the matter and potentially put additional pressure on the U.S. to reconsider its trade stance. In the end, Canada's response to Trump's tariffs is multifaceted and not limited to immediate retaliation. While some industries may benefit from these countermeasures, the broader economic implications could be far-reaching. The trade tensions between the U.S. and Canada may not only reshape their bilateral relationship, but also influence the global trade system as both countries navigate this high-stakes economic battle. So, who's truly winning here? The answer remains uncertain, but the cost of tariffs may ultimately hit everyday people the hardest, on both sides of the border.